All right, so for each of these organ systems, like we have said before, we'll talk about the function, what the purpose of that system is, what some of the parts are, and then we'll talk about some of the problems that can arise with that system. So when we talked about the characteristics of living things, well, one thing we talked about is that all living things have the ability to respond to changes in their environment. And the nervous system is one of the body systems that allows us to respond to changes in the environment. And we're going to talk about really kind of three major organs of the nervous system: the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. Okay? Here we'll just mention them, and then we'll talk about each of them in a little bit more detail. Okay? So the brain. Obviously the brain is very important. It's the main organ of the nervous system. And the brain is responsible for sort of taking in information, processing it, and then, if necessary, providing some kind of response. Our brain does all of that. Our spinal cord is also an important part of the nervous system. The spinal cord is a pathway for these messages to be sent back and forth to the brain. Okay? So when the brain sends a message out to another part of the body, it has to go through the spinal cord. And when information from other parts of the body are coming into the brain, they travel through the spinal cord to the brain. And then, coming out from the spinal cord are a whole variety of what we call nerves. Okay? In this picture, what's shown in green, those are nerves that run all throughout our body, transmitting this information back. And all these various parts work together to accomplish the functions of the nervous system. Bless you.
Thank you.
So one of the functions of our nervous system is to take in information from the outside world, from our environment. And the organs we have that are also really considered a part of the nervous system are our sense organs. Our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, our skin. Our senses are important because they take information from the outside. How something tastes is a stimulus from the outside. Sounds that we hear. Things that we see. Feeling the temperature of something or the texture of something. This is all information that comes in through our senses, gets conveyed up to the brain, which kind of makes sense out of it, interprets it, and then can respond afterwards. So we call that information coming into the nervous system stimulus or stimuli. And then how we react is called the response. So some examples of a stimulus, information coming in. You're smelling something really bad, like starting here. Hearing a loud noise, and turning to see what it was. A bright light causing our pupils to constrict. Okay? Those are examples of a stimulus and then the corresponding response. There are also internal stimuli. There's internal responses within our body that help make sure everything is functioning properly. So let's talk a little bit more about the brain. So our brain is an organ made of billions of individual cells called neurons. A neuron is the term we use for a nerve cell. And the brain gathers information from all the other parts of the nervous system, processes it, and then responds accordingly. I'm going to pass around the brain. This is from a sheep. This is a sheep's brain. It's sealed up in this bag. Doesn't smell or anything. But if you look at it, as I pass around, you should notice it has different parts, different sections. And we'll talk about what the parts of the brain are here in a second. Please don't smush it. You can pick it up and touch it and sort of feel texture. Just don't smush it.
Do we get to see a human brain?
No, we don't get to see a human brain.
Is that just part of the brain?
Is it what?
Is that just part of the brain?
No, that's the whole brain of a sheep. That's how big it is.
When do we dissect
At the very end of this unit. Read.
When you teach, when you tell someone about like how the nerves like get to your body and like tell it to react and everything, you don't really realize how fast it must get there.
Yeah.
Like you have to react really quickly.
Yeah.
Then
We're-
your brain's pretty big.
We're going to talk about that. And it does happen quickly, but not instantly. And that's going to be something we talk about. So our brain's job is to interpret messages, take in information, okay, and then relay that information sometimes to other parts of the body. So attached to the base of our brain is our spinal cord. Okay? Our spinal cord, which I'm going to pass around, this is a section of a spinal cord from a cow. It's not obviously the whole length of the spinal cord, but this is it. It's about, you could feel it. It's pretty tough there. But this is, again, made of nerve tissue.
Do we get to feel it?
No. And the spinal cord's job is to connect the brain to the nerves of our body. And our spinal cord is really important, obviously. And it's protected. What is our spinal cord, the actual nerve tissue, protected by? Okay? Our vertebrae. So when you look at the spine of a person, we have these vertebrae. They support our body, hold us upright. They pivot over each other so we could turn and twist. But also, this is a model of the vertebrae. When you look at these vertebrae, they have like a tunnel. So if you look at this individual vertebrae, has this tunnel between each bone. And in that tunnel, which I'm holding right here, this yellow, this is the actual spinal cord. And so these bones help protect that spinal cord. Okay? So that it's not damaged. So our vertebrae help protect that spinal cord. Yeah?
So when someone goes paralyzed, they rupture their spinal cord?
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a second. Yeah.
Why doesn't the cows have it?
If we look at the nervous system, this is from that body's exhibit. See the brain, the spinal cord running up the middle. And attached to that spinal cord are these other nerves. They branch off from the spinal cord and they go down. So as your spinal cord goes out, nerves travel down your arms, into your torso, into your midsection, into your hips, down into your legs. And these nerves are what carry information from our brain and out, and also from our body parts up to our brain. Okay? And we'll talk more about Well, let's talk about it now. So, Tatum just asked about damage to the spinal cord. So when a person does damage their spinal cord, it can result in a major injury. Okay? The spinal cord is pretty well protected within our vertebrae, but a sudden trauma, a sudden impact can damage that spinal cord. If we break these vertebrae, it's possible to also damage the spinal cord inside. These vertebrae kind of get shifted and displaced. It could pinch the spinal cord, or sever, we call it, the spinal cord. And if there is a break in the spinal cord, that's a major problem. Because unlike bone tissue or skin, for example, nerve tissue does not heal very well. So if you have a complete cut in the spinal cord, severing of the spinal cord, what happens is, for example, if a person damaged their spinal cord down here, their brain can still work fine. Their brain could be telling their legs to move and to walk around and to stand up. And it sends that message down the spinal cord. But if there's a break along the way, that message can't get past the break. There's a gap. And therefore, the message telling their legs to move, telling their muscles how to work, never gets to the legs. And they therefore can't move them at all. Hold on. Or, at the same time, if a person has a spinal cord injury, if you poke them in the leg, they have the nerve receptors in their skin are still working fine, but that message that travels up normally would travel to their brain, and then they would feel that and say, oh, that hurts. But that message from their legs gets up to the break in the spinal cord, and it can't continue all the way to the brain, so they have no feeling in those parts of their body below the break either. And so when a person has a spinal cord injury like that, the higher up that injury happens, the more damaging it is. If there's a severe spinal cord injury up high in the neck area, that can lead to the loss of the use of both a person's legs and their arms. Because again, if that break is up here, well, their brain is telling their arms to move, but the message gets to that break and it can't go any further. So they may lose the use of both their arms and legs. Okay? And the doctors do not have a very good way of helping that spinal cord to heal. They can't just like sew it back together like they would with a cut in your skin and it would heal eventually. Spinal cord doesn't heal like that. Matt?
You know how they said you could do the bypass
Yes.
surgery? Can you do that with?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you would think, okay, well, there's damage there. Can we just go around it? We haven't been able to do that yet.
Alright.
And there's a lot of research, because obviously for people with spinal cord injuries, that would be a huge advancement if doctors could come up with some way of helping that nerve tissue to heal, of bypassing it, something like that. So far, we've not come up with a good solution, but you know, if medicine continues to advance, it could be possible. James?
You should maybe do like a surgery, like cut all because the pieces should probably still be in you.
Yeah.
Like, couldn't they just put those back in place temporarily
They-
until like it makes?
Yeah, no, they can't. It's because it's not like a bone where because with a bone to heal, you could hold the pieces together, and then they eventually grow together. So yeah, you might be able to hold the two pieces of the spinal cord like right near each other, but nerve tissue doesn't heal like bone tissue does, so it wouldn't grow back together to reestablish that functioning. Tatum?
There was a girl on my team, she got hit and she like chipped her spinal cord and she can still, but she has to be in a wheelchair, but sometimes she can walk on like certain things and stuff.
Yeah.
And she still move her arms and it's like up here. Why is that?
So there are other things kind of. So what I was sort of talking about was a severing of your spinal cord. It's like cut completely through. Sometimes a person can have their spinal cord like pinched. So it's not like broken, but nerve impulses do not travel normally. And they may have a loss, not a complete, I can't use this part at all, but limited functioning. You can also break the vertebrae, but not the spinal cord that's inside. Because some people think if you break, like they say, you broke your back. Well, these vertebrae can break sometimes, But as long as there's no damage to the spinal cord inside, then it's okay. I mean, yes, the bones can heal, but the spinal cord's not damaged. Kevin?
So, for like, say you broke up brain and neck, what, could you just like, I don't know how James was talking about like putting it back together, but could you just like put a brace, like on one of those neck things there, like where, just like heal.
But the spinal cord never heals back together.
Oh,
That's the
I
problem.
was talking about the bone.
Oh yeah, because people can have their vertebrae can, yeah, you might be put in a big brace. Sometimes people that have injuries like that, they have a big metal, it's called a halo, that they sort of have to wear, and it holds everything in place, aligns all of the bones so that they have time to heal. Yeah, they have ways of allowing that, but that's more for the bone than it is for the spinal cord. Abby?
What happens if you have like a crooked neck? I forgot what it's called.
Like scoliosis? Yeah, I know people that have scoliosis, and I know people that have had major surgery. Because scoliosis is when the back curves unnaturally, and over time it can lead to like pinching of the spinal cord, pinching of nerves, and they may have to have surgery to help straighten that out or to reestablish the proper. But it can usually be treated. James?
Is there like maybe doctors could like put the piece back into place, but it like they know it won't heal, but maybe they can like I don't know, just like tape it there or something, and then will the nerve still be able to pass through?
No, because it has to heal in order for that to pass through. So yeah. All right. Let's yeah, Matt, quick.
Are they can they do like surgery? Like they take like if like somebody like, can they take one spinal cord and put
Like transplant spinal cord? No, good. That's a good question. No, they can't do that yet either. Some scientists think that maybe using stem cells, which we're not going to get into, a person's stem cells may help with regenerating, nerve tissue. But still, there's something they're working on. All right, the brain itself. If you saw that brain as we passed it around, that sheep brain, you'll notice the brain is like different sections that you can see. Okay, the human brain is just like that. It has these same parts that you saw in the sheep brain, and the parts are called the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and then the medulla or the brainstem. And different parts of the brain are responsible for different functions in our body. The cerebrum is this largest part of the brain. On the sheep brain, it was all of this section here, okay, with all those folds and so forth inside of it. And that is where our brains allow us to think, have sort of thought, where our brains kind of store memories, where we control lots of different voluntary actions, learning, things like that, generally takes place in the cerebrum. The cerebellum, which on this sheep brain is back here, the section towards the back. Okay. The cerebellum is responsible for sort of more maintenance activities within our body, maintaining our coordination, our balance, the movement of our limbs and so forth. Those sorts of things are controlled in the cerebellum. And then at the very bottom, on the sheep brain, it's this little section, sort of, you see on the underside, the medulla, which controls involuntary actions. Things like our breathing rate, our heart rate, blinking, things that we have involuntary control of, things that really keep us alive. And this is also why you may have heard sometimes a person can have major damage to their cerebrum and not be conscious, not be able to think or be aware, but still be alive because the parts of their brain maintaining their breathing and their heart rate are deep in the brain in the medulla that keeps them alive. Sometimes. Kendall, do you have a question? Okay. And so, can you guess, how do scientists know, like that breathing and heart rate's controlled by the medulla, but thought and memory is controlled by the cerebrum? How do you think, what kind of things would help them figure that out? Kendall?
Like somebody only injuring like one part of their brain, so being able to do everything else.
Yeah, that's exactly it. By studying people that have had brain injuries, Sometimes a person has an injury in some accident and only damage a very specific part of their brain. And if doctors study that person, they see, okay, well, how did damaging this section of the brain affect the person? What kind of things are different now after this injury than they were before? And that can help them sort of trace what these different parts of the brain did. And again, if you look at a human brain, sort of looking at the side, okay, we have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and then the medulla. And then what connects down here to the medulla? Yeah, that's where the spinal cord would have been attached.
So like, what happens when you have like a stroke?
Well, it depends. A stroke is basically damage to a part of your brain. It could be caused by bleeding or swelling. It could be caused by a few different things. And a part of the brain could be damaged permanently. That leads to more permanent effects, like sometimes paralysis of certain parts of the body or difficulty in speech or movement, things like that. This little video clip from a movie you may have seen, maybe not.
Waterboy.
I haven't seen this.
Waterboy.
Yeah.
What is that?
Waterboy.
I've never seen
Oh,
this.
Waterboy.
You've never seen
What's
Waterboy?
I've
All right, go ahead and watch a little preview.
What is that?
Y'all shut up now.
It's like Colonel Sanders.
Talk about physiology of the animal brain as it pertains to aggression. Now, is there anyone here to tell me why most alligators are abnormally aggressive?
I know the answer to this question. Please your hand.
Anybody? Anyone? Yes or you, sir?
Mama said that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
No, Mama said alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Wow. Anybody else? Yes or you, sir?
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the sector of the brain which controls aggressive behavior.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata.
Mama
The medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from. Now, is there anybody here can tell me where happiness comes from? Anyone? All right. Let's hear what Mama has to say on the subject.
Mama say that happiness is from magic ray sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong.
It is
Mama's
Colonel
right.
Sanders.
Mama's right. Something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
All right.
Oh, I never seen that.
So let's talk now. Just the next section is a little bit okay. Our nervous system, our brain, our spinal cords, our nerves are made of individual cells. And we're going to talk about them in a little more detail. So our nervous system allows us to communicate, and that happens through what we call nerve impulses. Nerves impulses travel from one part of our body to another. Travels down nerve cells. And so a nerve impulse can begin as a stimulus, information coming in that our brain interprets, and then the brain can send out the appropriate response. And so this is what one neuron looks like, one nerve cell. They have sort of a unique shape. They don't look much like the cells we studied early in the year. They have this special shape that allows them to take a message from one area and send it to another. You have to know the parts of the neuron, bless you. And so this neuron, its job is to receive a message and then send it along. So the parts of this neuron, these areas here where like most of the cytoplasm of the cell would be. It's called the cell body. This is also where the other organelles are located, mitochondria and so forth. What organelle do you think this is shown here? Yeah, that's the nucleus.
It's all being on
Around the outside of this cell body, all these little branches, those are called the dendrites of the neuron. The long section, the elongated part is called the axon. And then the very end of that axon, these little sort of enlarged areas, that's areas called the terminal. And each of these parts has a certain job to do that we're going to talk about. So here's another picture again with all of it labeled. You have all these branches of dendrites, the nucleus, cell wall, and so forth. So the cell body is like the headquarters, the main area of the neuron, where the nucleus is located. The dendrites that surround that cell body, they're sort of listening in for a message. They're going to pick up a nerve impulse from somewhere else and sort of send it along this neuron. They have all these branches because they're each waiting for a message from another area. And when they receive that message, they turn it into an electrical signal and send it along down the axon. And this uses electricity in our body. It uses an electrical. It's why being electrocuted, I almost was when I worked in the sanitarium in my is dangerous. Because those electricity from your house can interfere with the electrical signals in your body, in your heart, in your brain, in your nervous system. So the dendrites take in a signal, send it along through this long axon, which carries the message all the way down to the next cell. And once that message gets there, it ends at one of these terminals. The message gets to the very end of the neuron, and then it's at the very end, and these terminals can then open up and send a chemical message to the next neuron. What part of the next neuron is this that's shown here? No?
Oh, no, that's a dendrite.
That's a dendrite of the next nerve cell, which would be here, and which continues sending this message even farther. The space between the end of this neuron, the terminal, and the beginning of the next neuron, the dendrites, is called the synapse. It's the gap. And chemicals get released into that gap to allow the message to make it to the next dendrite. And then the next dendrite picks up the message, turns it to an electrical signal, and sends it along further. And this process repeats down one neuron to the next, and then down that neuron to the next. Okay, the dendrite collects a signal, sends it through the cell body, passes it all the way down through the axon, okay, to the end, to the terminals. Now, this happens quickly. Jane said it earlier. He said, it's amazing how our nervous system works so quickly. But it doesn't work instantly. It does take a short amount of time for these messages to move around our body. Okay? And one area that we can talk about is reaction time. So how many people are going to be trying track this spring? Modified track? A few people? Okay. Well, if you're running races in track, how do they start everybody that's racing?
On their knees.
Yeah, well, not sometimes they start standing up or in blocks, but what's the signal? Yeah, they have like a loud starting gun that they fire, makes a loud noise, and that's when everyone starts. What happens if you start early? You get disqualified. Now, in modified track, I think they might give you a redo. I don't know for sure. In world track events, in the Olympics, they don't give you a redo. If you start early and it's a false start, you're disqualified, you're out of the race. So if you're in the Olympics in the gold medal race for the 100-meter sprint, and you have a false start, you're out. And there's even another interesting fact. Obviously, you can't start before the gun goes off. But the actual rules in world track events say you can't even start after the gun goes off if it's less than 0.1 seconds. Okay, so you can't go, even if you start in, half in 0.05 seconds, even you went after the gun, you're still disqualified. Good question. That was my question. Why? Why would they penalize? You started after the gun. Why are they going to disqualify you? Connor? You were guessing. No human's nervous system can hear the gun go off, convey that information to the brain, then send the impulses down to the legs to have them start running that quickly. It's impossible. So if you did start at 0.05 seconds, like Connor just said, you happen to guess correctly. You happen to start a little bit early, and then the gun went off, and you got lucky. But it's still a disqualification because our nervous system takes time to process and use information, and so that rule is in effect. Okay. This video just shows somebody's, this is Asafa Powell. He's one of the fastest runners in the world. But you could see the reaction time. Try to watch when he starts running in comparison to when the gun goes off. Again, so there's a little bit of a delay there. And so one of the things that an elite runner will work on is their starts. That's probably what he's doing here. Not working on his speed, just working on his reaction time to try to have the quickest start possible. Can you notice that?